For two women, separated by decades and hundreds of miles, the 28th of July became that kind of day. One would become a ghostly legend, a bride in white, forever searching a lonely Florida bridge after a supposed fiery death. The other was a beautiful young woman whose body was found floating in the Hudson River on that exact date. Her death would spark an unsolved mystery that gripped the nation and even inspired the master of the macabre himself, Edgar Allan Poe. These are two true stories, linked by a single chilling date. Is it just a coincidence? Or are there strange echoes in time that we just don't understand yet? Our first story takes us down to the humid, mossy swamps of the Florida Panhandle, to a place that feels dripping with Southern Gothic atmosphere. Near the town of Mariana, the skeletal iron frame of the Bellamy Bridge spans the dark, murky waters of the Chipola River. For over 100 years, this bridge has been the center of one of Florida's most tragic and enduring ghost stories. It's the story of Elizabeth Jane Bellamy, a young bride whose best day turned into an absolute nightmare. The legend, as locals and ghost hunters tell it, begins in the 1830s. Elizabeth Jane Croom was a vibrant young woman from a wealthy family, madly in love with a doctor named Samuel Bellamy. Theirs was a storybook romance. Samuel even built a stunning mansion for his bride-to-be near the river, the home where they would start their new life. Elizabeth loved it so much, she asked to be married in its beautiful rose gardens. According to the legend, the wedding day was May 11, 1837. Surrounded by flowers and family, Elizabeth and Samuel said their vows. As she spoke her final promise, she supposedly added a line from the heart. "I will love you always and forever. Never will I leave you." After the ceremony, a huge party kicked off inside the mansion. The air was filled with music and laughter. At some point, the young bride, exhausted from all the excitement, excused herself to go rest upstairs. She sank into a chair, her big white wedding gown pooling around her, and fell asleep. And this is where the story takes a horrific turn. The tale goes that as Elizabeth slept, her gown brushed against a lit candle. The delicate fabric, her symbol of a new beginning, instantly went up in flames. She woke up not to the party, but to the blinding, searing heat of being on fire. Her screams cut through the celebration downstairs. The music stopped. The laughter died. Everyone stared in shock as Elizabeth, a human inferno, ran down the grand staircase. Guests were helpless against the fire. Though they managed to put out the flames, the damage was done. Elizabeth was horribly burned. She clung to life for a few agonizing days before finally passing away. Her last words to her husband were a pained whisper, echoing their vows. "I will love you always and forever." Completely heartbroken, Samuel buried Elizabeth in a grove of trees she loved near the river, not far from where the bridge that shares their name would later be built. The legend of the burning bride was born right then and there. But her story doesn't end with her death. They say her spirit couldn't rest, trapped by the trauma and a love that was stolen from her. Soon, locals started reporting strange things around Bellamy Bridge. They'd see a soft, glowing light moving through the trees on dark nights. They'd hear sad cries on the wind. And then came the sightings. The apparition of a woman in a white gown, sometimes solid, sometimes just a swirl of mist, walking the bridge or wandering the riverbanks. They say she's forever looking for her lost husband, Samuel, unable to find peace. Her presence is often marked by a sudden cold spot and the phantom smell of roses or burning cloth. The legend gets even darker when it comes to Dr. Samuel Bellamy. He was so consumed by grief that he never remarried. Years later, unable to bear the loss, he tragically took his own life. Because of the stigma around suicide back then, it's said he was buried in an unmarked grave, his resting place lost to time. This, the storytellers claim, is why their spirits can never be reunited. Elizabeth is trapped here, searching for a husband she can never find. Over the years, countless paranormal investigators and curious visitors have made the trip to Bellamy Bridge, hoping to see something. Many leave with their own stories, of car engines suddenly dying, electronics failing, or capturing strange orbs of light in photos. It's widely considered Florida's most haunted bridge, a monument to a love destroyed by fire. But here's the twist. Like a lot of legends, the story of the Burning Bride is a mix of fact and folklore. Historical records do confirm that Elizabeth Jane Croom Bellamy was a real person. She and Samuel were married, and she did die tragically young at 18 in 1837. But historical documents, including her own obituary, tell a different, though no less heartbreaking, story. They show that Elizabeth likely died not in a fire, but from an illness like malaria or yellow fever, which were deadly and common in Florida at the time. Records also reveal that just 1 week after Elizabeth's death, their infant son also died and was buried with her. The fiery death on her wedding night, the most dramatic part of the tale, seems to be a very old piece of folklore, possibly inspired by popular 19th century novels. So does the real story make the haunting any less powerful? For anyone who has stood on that old iron bridge as fog rolls in from the river and felt an unnatural chill, the ghost of Elizabeth Bellamy feels very real. Fact or fiction, her tragedy has soaked into the soil, leaving a permanent mark. But the Ghost Bride of Florida isn't the only chilling tale with a summertime connection. A few years after Elizabeth Bellamy's death, on the exact date of July 28th, another young woman's story would become an obsession for an entire city. Her case wasn't folklore. It was cold, hard, and brutal fact. A mystery that began when her body was pulled from the dark waters of the Hudson River. Our second story takes us to New York City, 1841. It was a chaotic, gaslit city, and its newspapers thrived on sensation and scandal. And in the summer of that year, no story was bigger than the death of Mary Cecilia Rogers. Mary was, for her time, something of a celebrity. She was born around 1820 and moved to New York with her mother after her father died. Mary was famously beautiful, which caught the eye of John Anderson, who owned a popular tobacco shop. He realized her looks could be great for business and hired her as a clerk. He wasn't wrong. Anderson's shop became the place to be. Men from all walks of life, including famous writers like Washington Irving and James Fenimore Cooper, flocked to the store not just for cigars, but for a chance to talk with the beautiful cigar girl, as the press called her. She was an icon of the city before that was even really a concept. But her life had a mysterious side. In 1838, she vanished. Her mother found an apparent suicide note. But a few days later, Mary returned, saying she'd just been visiting a friend. The whole thing was bizarre and a strange preview of what was to come. On Sunday, July 25, 1841, Mary, now engaged to a man named Daniel Payne, told him she was going to visit her aunt and left her mother's boarding house. She was never seen alive again. When she didn't come home, her mother figured she'd stayed with her aunt because of a big thunderstorm. The next day, she learned Mary never made it there. Panic set in. 3 days later, on Wednesday, July 28th, a group of men found a horrifying sight in the Hudson River near Hoboken, New Jersey. It was the body of a young woman, floating in the water. The corpse was quickly identified as Mary Rogers. The city erupted. The beautiful cigar girl was dead. And the details were horrific. Her body was bruised, with marks on her throat suggesting strangulation. A piece of lace was tied so tightly around her neck it was embedded in her skin. The press, which once celebrated her beauty, now feasted on the gruesome details of her murder. And the case became a national obsession. The investigation was a mess. New York City didn't have a professional police force like the NYPD yet, so it was unclear who was even in charge. Theories started flying. Was she the victim of a violent gang? Was her fiancé involved? One of the most persistent theories centered on a botched abortion. A tavern owner near where the body was found claimed a woman matching Mary's description had come to her place with a man on the day she disappeared. Her sons later heard screams from the nearby woods. This led to speculation that Mary had died during an illegal abortion performed by the infamous Madame Restel, a notorious New York abortionist. And her body was dumped in the river as a cover-up. The case got even stranger a few months later. Mary's fiancé, Daniel Payne, who was drowning in grief and suspicion, was found dead near the spot where Mary's body was discovered. He had poisoned himself. Beside him was a note that read, "To the world, here I am on the very spot. May God forgive me for my misspent life." Did this imply he was guilty? Or was he just a man broken by loss and public accusation? The investigation went nowhere. The murder of Mary Rogers, the girl who had captivated a city, was becoming one of its greatest unsolved mysteries. And this is what captured the imagination of Edgar Allan Poe. He had frequented the tobacco shop and knew of the beautiful cigar girl. He saw her unsolved murder as a puzzle, a challenge of pure logic. He believed he could solve it where the police had failed. Poe decided to write a story about the case. But he did something that had never been done before. He took the real-life facts of the Mary Rogers case and put them into a fictional story. He moved the setting to Paris, changed Mary's name to Marie Roget, and had his brilliant detective, C. Auguste Dupin, analyze the case. The story was called The Mystery of Marie Roget. In the story, Poe had Dupin sift through fictionalized newspaper clippings, applying pure logic to the facts. Through Dupin, Poe argued against the gang theory and pointed his finger at a single killer, a naval officer with whom the victim was having an affair. The Mystery of Marie Roget is now seen as a landmark in literary history. It was the first time a real crime had ever been turned into a detective story. Poe basically invented the armchair detective and laid the groundwork for the entire true crime genre that we're still obsessed with today. But did Poe actually solve the murder? His solution was compelling. But it was just a theory. No naval officer was ever charged. To this day, the murder of Mary Rogers remains officially unsolved. Her death, discovered on July 28, 1841, is a permanent fixture in American crime history, a story so strange that not even Edgar Allan Poe could put it to rest. Two women, two tragedies, both linked to the end of July. 1. A historical figure transformed by folklore into a fiery ghost born from love and loss. The other, a real-life victim whose brutal death became a national sensation and the blueprint for a new kind of storytelling. One story is a chilling reminder of how our deepest grief can create ghosts that linger for centuries. The other is proof that real-life horror can be even more baffling than fiction. They're tales from different worlds, one supernatural, one all too human, but both leave you with a deep sense of unease. They remind us that behind every ghost story and every cold case file is a real person whose story was cut short, their final chapter written by a date on the calendar. So, what do you think? Which story gets under your skin more? The lonely ghost of the burning bride? Or the cold, unsolved reality of the beautiful cigar girl's murder? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found these stories as creepy and fascinating as I did, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more dives into the strange, the mysterious, and the unexplained. Thanks for watching.